Welcome to Accelerate Performance. We are joined today with Jason. And Jason, your career has taken you from professional football to banking to running an accelerator in Qatar to building an investment platform. What would you say is the thread that connects these?
Um, I'm gonna say high performance. So I've always been a all or nothing type of person. And when I was playing football, I was going for Champions League, even though I was playing in the second league of the Netherlands. So quite far from it. But still, that was my ambition. When that didn't come to happen, I went for Champions League when I was in banking, Champions League when I was working at the accelerator, and now Champions League with Joyned Capital. And yeah, we're doing quite well.
High performance people throw that term around quite a lot. And what does it actually mean to you? How would you explain it to your life and how you work?
The way I approach it is continuous growth. For most people, their career is a way to simply exist, make money, and move forward. I look at it more as a continuous development of myself, where um, I think all aspects of life should improve. One of the key things we look for within Joint Capital actually is health, which is financial health, mental health, physical health. We're not a mental health company, but in order to have a good company and a sustainable company, one should have mental health. So that's the way I look at it actually, to
Yeah.
make sure that you're healthy in all these three aspects of your life.
It's quite a holistic view. You also founded your own startup. As we know, startups can be quite brutal. How what did you learn during that journey, and how did I suppose that impact health in its more general sense?
Well, the great thing at that time was that I was still fit. I was also not poor at the time, but also not rich. And I was young enough that if it didn't work out, I could always go back to banking, which I had a standing offer. I just didn't take it. Um, yeah, I think the biggest lesson is that entrepreneurship is messy, it's chaotic. The one thing um, th that really opened my eyes was that saying you're an entrepreneur and being in search of a business model is something completely different than actually having it. So I think 6 months in, I'd blown through my savings. We had spoken to a few customers. We made a first version of the product, which I called MVP, and then we made a second version, which I called prototype. So, got all of that messed up, and it was just, I think, a very um, a good experience to learn, what entrepreneurship is. And as mentioned, like it's messy, particularly in the beginning. I had the idea, I think, 3 years before starting, and when I started, it was actually not just me. I worked with two great partners, two great marketers, because the idea was around marketing. Um, and it was also a matter of how can we, manage our startup with their business? How can we manage me being a CEO, literally with air quotes, because I had no idea what I was doing, with them having more experience in the field of marketing. So, ultimately, the biggest lesson is that I want to make sure that within Joint Capital we have a certain structure and systems in place to help navigate through the chaos. I
Yeah.
think that's the summary of entrepreneurship to, make decisions with too little information in a structured manner and a pedal back or go into a different direction if you do have the information. That's pretty much it.
You've worn and you continue to wear, I suppose, quite a few different hats, really. The athlete, through to the operator, having your own startup, through to now being more the capital to help other businesses. Um,
hmm
there, there's a common thread, I suppose, through all of that, but it also brings quite a range of experience that not all funds will have. It makes you quite unique, in my opinion. Do you agree?
Well, I can't speak whether to how unique I would be, but um, what I can say is that if you, like me, work for yourself and try to figure out a lot of things, I'm a curious person. You can do quite a lot, but you cannot do all of those things well. So when I started Joint Capital about 5 years ago, I was all by myself. But lucky for me, I bumped into people who had similar vision and who joined me. At first, it was Benjamin. From an athlete perspective, it was Calvin. And right now, those guys are also the ones who are operational. And along the way, Robin, Jeremiah, and Willie also joined as partners. So we got to build together. So I think, yes, there's still a lot of roles that I'm doing. Same goes for Benjamin, same goes for Calvin. But um, when we continue to grow the way we're growing, it also helps us to not only hire, but help people succeed in the new roles that are um, developing within Joint Capital and require full-time attention. Because
Yeah,
that's also a thing, right? Like, I think every business to some extent is a media business because if you're not out there to get clients, it will be likely that they will not come to you. So you could say from the get-go, you should have a marketing person. But every business that does sales has contracts in some form or shape. So you might need legal assistance there as well. Should you hire a lawyer or should you work like it's always going to be a balance, figuring out which roles are both urgent as well as most impactful to the business,
yeah.
and then how much time they require.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That like ruthless prioritization is definitely something that startup and entrepreneurship because it needs because anyone who's been an entrepreneur they tend to like to say yes or see all the opportunities because of the curiosity that is ingrained. So in Qatar, when you were involved in that ecosystem, you analyzed a lot
Mhm.
of like startups.
Yeah,
Were there any patterns or how would you separate out ones that you saw were going to be successful and invested in or not?
I would say because we were a very early stage, we invested in mostly pre-seed companies, and I know these definitions are going from left to right and up and down depending on where we are in the economic cycle. Um, but I'd say most companies were pre-revenue, um, where we had a few obviously that made some money. The The ones that did best were the ones where, and this is common knowledge, not something that I figured out, where you just had the most dogged founders. Um, it's the people running the business that make the business. It's not a product, it's not the market they're in, it's the people. You either have founders who are going to figure it out, and sure, there is a lot of um, other stuff involved, mainly resources, because if you're going to figure it out, you need to have money to spend time on stuff that does not generate money, which is your pre-revenue startup. But if you have that, you also need to stick with it. And I'd argue that having the money to do so, whether it is your partner or whether it is, money you have in your savings account, is way less important than being relentless. And um, I've read quite a few books around being relentless. Relentless by Tim Grover, but also Grit by Angela Duckworth, Mindset, Carol Dweck. Um, Supposedly, it's something you can teach, um, but I'd say that within the accelerator, you could see within 10 minutes who were relentless and who were not relentless. And that doesn't make you a bad human. It just
No.
doesn't make you, at that point in time, um, somebody who's fit to be a founder and run a business because it's hard. It's going to be hard most of the times. Life's hard most of the times, but as an entrepreneur, that's um, um, yeah, I think 10x, which is I think also the reason why I like it so much because that's pretty much the same as being an athlete. It's hard
Yeah.
most of the times. Everybody hates training, but I used to be a striker, and it's always already 20 years ago that I was probably at my best. Um, you live for the goals, you live for the wins, but that's such a very small portion of your career as an athlete um, that you need to love the journey. You need to also understand that it's going to be a part of it and just continue. And yeah, that's not for everyone.
Yeah, that discipline and that resilience and the fact that you just have to do it regardless. So it's not motivation half the time. It is just the discipline,
No,
because
it's discipline.
if it was motivation, people it would ebb and flow, and you've just got to keep that consistency going. I think we talked about kind of high performance, but there's also an element, and I'd love to get your take on the term high agency. Have you come across
Hmm.
that? And like the ability to kind of get things done with whatever resources you have, and to get past any of those barriers or challenges. So it's never a no. It's okay. Well, we'll just find a different way through that path. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting concept that we all kind of allude, or we all go to high performance, but actually just getting the work done and the high
Yeah.
agency aspect is a key part as well.
When I was early in my journey with Joyned Capital, I had the fortune to speak with Alex McDonald, who runs SQL. And one of the things we discussed, and he was very open, very kind in sharing his learnings from Velocity Black. And he said one of the most important traits we look for are people who score high on conscientiousness,
Hmm.
which you can test through multiple tests. But being so committed to getting your job done um, proved to be a critical factor in success in their business. And I think it is towards life. Um, if you set out to do something and it becomes inconvenient, do you continue or do you stop? Um, you know, take any documentary from a top athlete, whether it's The Last Dance from Michael Jordan or the documentaries around Kobe Bryant. These are the stories you see. They continue um, until such point as time that the job is done, and it's only done when they retire.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we've kind of like alluded to what is it that athletes bring to investment that traditional VCs don't historically. And it is probably some of these characteristics that we've just kind of listed off. Are there
It
any
is
others
mindset.
that you would say?
I think mindset, which is individual and discipline, and then there is the ability to be incredibly egocentric within a team. Because as an athlete, um, uh, I played until the first team, but I only trained with the first team. I never made my debut, so I never became a professional athlete. One of the things that I keep thinking about is that as a striker, you want to score goals. In training, to show yourself that you could be a sub for the person who's playing, or when you're playing, that you can remain a starter. Um, but I can only score goals if I get the ball from one of my other teammates. So even though everybody wants to perform and needs to perform at their highest level, you all need to do it in a symphony, so to speak. And I think that is something that really directly translates to business, particularly startups, because you're working in a resource constrained environment and time. So you need to do more with less compared to larger companies and organizations. That is something that athletes can, if they're verbally equipped, get across like nobody else because they understand it best.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's that kind of team aspect, but also um, the individual participation within it as well, and
Hmm.
the value that you add. And sometimes there's a perception, and I suppose it's been such a huge growth of athletes becoming involved in investment that they're just either lending their name, it's more of a marketing tool.
Hmm.
Um, how do you structure involvement when you've been working with athletes in investment that means that they're really genuinely either, I suppose it's aligned to what their purpose and their beliefs are, or they're adding value within that investment ecosystem?
What we try to do is to look for companies where we can add value beyond money, or it is I call it shut up and take my money type of company where you're just happy to get an allocation on the cap table. But the way I see it is I didn't start Joint Capital just for the sakes of helping athletes invest their money and become smart investors. I did it because when you have, let's say your career starts at 18, 19, you get your first real contract, and you're able to play until you're 35, which is very rare. But let's say that happens. I'm 35 right now, so I don't plan on dying anytime soon. So let's say I have a good 50 years more to live. How are you going to fill those 50 years?
Mm.
Because if you took care of your money in an intelligent way, you don't have to work for money anymore. So work now is about purpose. It's about figuring out what do I want to add to society that isn't there yet, or where do I want to make my mark? And mind you, these are athletes. They're not used to just being somebody. When they do it, they want to do it well, and they
Mm.
want to do it extraordinary well, actually. And I see adding value to an industry which is the sports industry, but from a different perspective, as a great pathway, which is what we're looking for. In practice, that means that we look for companies where the athletes can leverage their network, their experience, and their expertise to help those companies generate new revenue, improve their products, and ultimately become better companies and add more value to the sports industry.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. The We see a lot of, like, I suppose, high profile, big name athlete investors. Is
Mhm.
that is that where it stops, or are you actually seeing it filtering down into lower level athletes as well? Even as you say, 18-year-olds at the kind of the beginning of their career. Are those kind of conversations happening?
Yeah, they are. And I think the interesting part is um, if you take a lower level athlete, they're still the best in the world. So let's say you're playing in the second league in the UK. You're one of, say, you have probably 40, let's say, call it 40 teams. It's not actually 40 teams, but 40 teams in the first two leagues. That's 40 teams with 20 players. That's 800 people. Um, in whole England, you're at the top 800 of football players. So lower tier, but still you're very exceptional if you look at it percentage-wise for the population.
Yeah.
That being said, the burden or the impact of being financially intelligent and savvy um, is way bigger for somebody who makes less money than somebody who makes a lot of money. If you're at the, very elite levels of football, call it the Lamine Yamal of today's age, or the Messi or Ronaldos for the people who are my age, um, they would have to act so incredibly stupid with their money for it to have a lasting impact on their life. Whereas for somebody who indeed plays second tier or third tier and still makes some money, that could bankrupt them.
Mm.
So yes, you're seeing athletes from different levels get into investing and even earlier on, so they decrease their risk because ultimately during COVID, I think most athletes had a wake-up call, seeing that this could all be over, and luckily COVID was, I think, a black swan event. The last time it happened was 100 years before, so it's unlikely, but it was a reminder. It acted as a reminder, at least that's what I saw in my environment and the people we spoke with, that the sporting career will end and that you need to think about what are you going to do at that point in time. Having time to decide who you want to be and what you want to do, that's where money comes into place.
Yeah, yeah. In if you were talking to or advising like a sports tech founder about approaching or being involved with athlete investors,
Mhm.
how would you advise that conversation to go? What would be the points that you would want to, like, ultimately it's relationship building in all aspects of kind of business and entrepreneurship. Do you find people put the emphasis on that aspect, or do they go to kind of, this is my product, this is the features, kind of, what have you seen in your experience?
The best founders do the former. The founders who still have a lot of room to grow do the latter. Um, I think everybody in an ideal world gets smart money. And smart money isn't just the individual being smart, it's the individual being involved. Um, and you wanting their involvement because somebody might be incredibly skilled in one area, but if they're investing in a completely other, then skills do not directly translate. Every company has finance, every company has legal, every company has marketing, every company has HR because they're working with people. And now most companies have some form of a technical component. So these, go across industries. But ideally, you look for people who can help you with the most important thing you're facing as a young company, which is sales. you need to find new customers and close those new customers.
Mm.
Um, where I think founders can benefit most from working with athletes is cultivating those relationships, understanding how these athletes are positioning themselves within their team and within their wider network. Because one of the biggest learnings we've had since running Joint Capital is that it's pretty hard for an athlete actually to go to their marketing director or go to the head of medical and say, hey, this is a company I've been speaking to. I want you to try this, or this is a product that I've been using in my own time. It helps me recover, and therefore I think it's interesting for you. Because these people see them as athletes. They do not necessarily see them as business people or
Yeah.
conduits for businesses. So you need to develop your persona as an athlete in order to be effective at sales or creating business opportunities, even for the portfolio companies you've already invested in.
Yeah.
And it's up to founders to help athletes navigate that path
Yeah.
because they
I,
are willing.
Yeah, I call it, like, with my MBA hat on, like stakeholder management. It's like
Yes,
understanding all the people involved in an ecosystem and the different perspectives and motivators and where they're coming from and how you can navigate those conversations. And that might actually mean changing your language, changing the
it
way
does.
that like changing the emphasis of what you put on it. Because, yeah, athletes will be viewed and as like the end user. But as you
Mhm.
say, there's different power dynamics
They
that,
can also be the architect. They can
yeah,
be the
yeah,
product developer. They can be scrum masters, product managers. Like there are so many roles they could fulfill, and there are actually more and more initiatives around it. Good friends of mine are running Pathways, which is founded by Jeremy Frimpong, and the idea there is that athletes who do not make it, so they do not make pro or they play pro very briefly, they need to transition into a new pathway for life, and that's where they help them. And one of the things we're talking about is what are the most um, reasonable pathways for athletes to start figuring out their new life. Like, what's their first step? Because the first step is so important.
yeah,
It's, being overweight and sitting on the couch and thinking, I want to get fit, but how do I start? And it's always nice to have somebody to help guide you to your first step, whether that is, going for a run or doing 5 push-ups or walking up to the gym or to the paddle court. And on the financial side, that's where we come in. But I think on the personal development side, getting yourself into the world of business pathways plays an important role. But overall, I'm just seeing more and more people involved in this space of thinking about what do athletes need beyond their physical fitness.
yeah. Which there's a, if we go back to kind of that health conversation, there is obviously like a financial health benefit, but there's also a
Sure,
huge like psychological kind of mental side, as you
there
alluded
is.
to, not a mental health business, but by finding purpose for people who, and I always talk about it on just a very personal level around identity. Like we throw a lot of we link ourselves to what our job title or our role is
Hmm.
at that point, and sometimes forgetting who we are as an individual. And it happens in lots of different settings. It can happen related to the title, it can happen through life events when you're suddenly a mother but you're not a partner so much, or what happens. So just time kind of being curious, not always about what's happening externally, but as you say, what you want internally is a
Hmm.
massive part of them making sure that you're aligned to where, and it probably it makes all the conversation so much clearer as well if you know what you want from it.
And if there is space for you to one process it and two communicate it to your environment. And I think within sports, athletes are not used to um, one creating space and then two actually speaking out. It's the exception, not the rule. We had a meeting this morning with a good friend of ours who runs Play Mental and House of Acceleration, and this is actually what they do. They speak to athletes at the highest level who are still trying to figure out who they are as an individual and how to manage um, their mental side in order to perform as an athlete, but also perform as a father or as a mother, as a partner, as a teammate. Because um, indeed, there are a lot of roles, and you need to deliver. You want to deliver on all those roles because you also have an athlete mindset.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, if done well, you can excel, and there are no, um, yeah, there are no things you cannot accomplish.
Yeah. One of the questions I kind of wanted to ask you was around like if you having pitched as a founder yourself, having evaluated different companies as from an accelerator point of view and as an investor, what would be like the single biggest advice for these founders of how to kind of move the needle with investment? But I actually think we might have answered it through it's like being human, like having human conversations is probably
Yeah,
an
that works.
element of it.
But also knowing who you're speaking to. Like some investors actually are not interested to speak about their personal life or to do the
Yeah.
chit chat because they're humans. Like every human has different things that interest them, which can also change over time and in scenarios. So just figure out who you have across from you. Spend some more time. There are founders who are taking the scraper route, so they'll scrape email addresses and they just blast and see what works. Um, and I almost am inclined to make a comparison between the spray and pray technique, which is very common within VC, or the technique of a private equity fund. When we speak about finance, and I think this is not just us, but pretty much the world, um, private equity is the highest level of finance. It's where people make the most money. It's also where they break the most things, to be honest. But their approach is be very good in a few things, which is also what Warren Buffett said. Diversification is for when you don't know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing, focus. And when you focus, you can get the most success. I think that's the key lesson here. So try to um, fully understand what you're looking for as a founder, then understand what the investor you're approaching is looking for. And if it's a match, go for it. Be
Mm.
prepared and approach it as if you would any long-term relationship, because these are the people who are going to put their money in, but they will also have a voice and an opinion. How will they treat you when things are not going well? When you do not do what was in your deck? And trust me, that's going to be the case 9 out of 10 times. Um, yeah, these are all things you want to figure out. And if if for some reason a founder feels like, yeah, but that's a waste of time if I'm going to spend hours researching an investor, maybe so, but you're also pitching investors who are not interested and just take the meeting for the sake of taking the meeting,
Mm.
because that also happens.
Yeah.
I've taken meetings with founders where I was like, within 5 minutes, I was like, yeah, this is not it, but I'll be polite and let you finish the conversation. I've also had meetings where after 5 minutes I said, you know what, this is not going to work. I'm Dutch, and when I introduce myself, I always say I'm very Dutch, which means I'm direct. But yeah, I also am considerate of the fact that, you went out, you probably quit your job, and you're spending your life savings on this particular thing. I'm just not the right person to get involved because I don't care about it, or I cannot add value to it, or I actually don't see what you're working towards, and I have no idea whether you have the grit to see it through. So I'm not going to be involved. Um, yeah, and you want to, yeah, get as close as making sure that somebody is willing to really spend time with you and figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So spend time. That is like to summarize it, I'd say spend time researching the investor, also understand what you're looking for and what you need, and then see whether it's a match or not. And if it is, go for it.
There's probably a bit of an athlete mindset there around preparation, isn't there? You don't just turn up and play the match. There's
No,
and the saying that
and then
like
expect to be successful.
yeah, and there's also that saying, isn't there, that oh everyone's like oh it was an overnight success, and it was like it wasn't an overnight success. You just didn't see all the years and years of
Exactly.
preparation that happened. You just see the limelight moment that now is the success.
Yeah, I think it's the saying, every overnight success is 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that is, for us, we've been at it for 5 years, and we're still 5 years away probably from the objective that I'm looking for, but we're creeping closer. And I think that same goes for founders. As a founder, you should have your objective for, 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years. But figure out who should be in your corner today in order to get you closer.
Yeah.
That's your job.
If we switch the conversation to like less of the kind of less general in the market and more to Joyned Capital. Do
Sure.
you have, obviously, you're athletes by background. Are you solely investment thesis focused or thematic on sports tech? How do you look at the, like from a VC or an investment perspective?
Interesting question. For us, I took sports as a focus for two reasons. So one, it's the industry you're in, which means that the chances of you being able to add value, which also makes you more bought into the success of the companies you're involved with, is higher. And the second thing is that it's an industry where if you're looking to do something after your career, there's already a place for you because you're known. There's some form of credibility.
Hmm.
That being said, I think as an investor, you should be able to look at investment opportunities based on its merits. So just look at the financial projections, look at the people who are involved with the company, understand market trends, and based on that, make an informed decision. So ideally, any investor would be able to invest across industries from fintech to sports tech, from biotech to regtech or whatever, what have you. Um, so yes, we're not excluding other sectors, but I think sports and sports adjacent work best for athletes who are just getting started. And all things considered, we're still just getting started.
Yeah, because sports obviously comes with its own challenges. It's the pinnacle, and everyone would love the halo effect of working with pro sport athletes as a founder. But it's
Mhm.
also got long sales cycles, complex stakeholders that we've talked around there. Um, have from what you've seen, are there particular businesses or founders or product market fit that works best in those environments?
Sure. So I think our approach for sports is that if sports is your only market, it's very unlikely that we'll invest, because the sports market, as you mentioned, apart from all the difficult stakeholders that you need to manage, it's also not that big. It's
Mm,
only big when you get a big portion of the market. So that will not be the case for the vast majority of companies. So we actually see the sports market more as a validation market,
yeah.
an attention market, and then you can spread to whichever market you want to grow towards. In a lot of cases, that will be the health market, but it might also be broader media, um, which opens up a larger market size and therefore potential for the business to grow.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And the what we're seeing, I suppose, is also the professionalization of different levels of the sport market as well, with private equity
True.
money going into collegiate US, into the colleges in the US, and how that affects then scheduling and demand on player availability and aspects like that. So, but the problems that then a founder was maybe looking to solve in that areas, as you say, does have applicability into different markets, be it health, well-being, military, other high performance or athletic population groups.
Correct. And I think the opportunity as an investor or as a prospective investor is to look for founders who see beyond what they're currently doing. So if the vision is, yeah, we're going to sell to US college teams because they have a lot of money and we think we can be very big, um, yeah, most likely no. You might be able to build a lifestyle business out of it, but it's very unlikely that you'll get the full market. So they need to go and look beyond that as a starting point or beyond that starting point. Now, the one thing that is very interesting is indeed, as you mentioned, there's more money pouring into sports from private equity, which is an effect. Um, I think the teams who are playing in the second league in the UK have higher budgets than most of the first league teams here in the Netherlands, bar probably our top three.
Okay.
So, and that's all to do with the big media deal that has been closed for Premier League and Championship football.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I think La Liga sold a big ownership percentage to a big private equity company as well. We will not advertise for them here.
No.
But there are also smaller initiatives where, private equity companies are starting hockey leagues for kids, or that they've opened up the NIL payments for students in the US. Like there's more and more money available, which also means that there are more and more people going to be involved. It's
Yeah.
opportunities, and there's also um, risks, and it's about managing it. But that also opens up the opportunity for a lot of companies to jump in.
Yeah, and I think it really it does muddy the water, and we alluded to it at the beginning, like seed, pre-seed, where everything is now. Um, but also, I suppose private equity is traditionally um, been interested in bricks and mortar, where you would say VCs aren't. But
Mhm.
when you've got the building of new sport infrastructure as kind of a startup as well, and the ecosystem, again, I can see that there'll be more and more of a need for founders to really understand that where that investment capital is coming from and what they would be particularly interested in, because I think the traditional terms are my impression are slightly muddied as well now.
True, and I think for founders, they do well to also really try and understand the journey of, raising private capital for their company, and particularly institutional capital, because it brings about a different journey. Um, we spoke with a founder who exited their business, and at some point, they had a valuation of, I think, 40, 50 mil. But he said, like, I'm on a hamster wheel and I don't like it. It's hamstringing my business. They want me to pour money into growth. I want to focus on making a sustainable business. I think he didn't give the money back, but he really scaled down growth, got a lot of his team, and just focused on profitability. And I was able to exit his business for a good amount, which made he did well by his investors, he did well by his team, and he did well by himself. And now he's investing into the next generation. I think those are very interesting stories because the VC route is not the end all be all solution for athletes. It's a route to move fast if you want to build something that's very big. But a company that's doing 5 million in revenue, having, let's say, a 10 to 15% profit margin, is not interesting for venture capital.
No.
But, if you're doing, let's say, yeah, if we take those numbers, you have a terrific business. Like
Yeah.
you can probably put 10, 15 people to work who all have a salary with which they can support their families. You have a nice life. You can go on holiday whenever you want. You can go out for dinner every time you want. There's nothing wrong with that. So the VC route is for a few, and I think we're almost thinking it's for everybody, and it's the only way for you to become successful, and it clearly isn't.
Yeah. And I think people also need to remember their friends and family, the bootstrap, the like. It's not jumping towards. We see some big numbers and figures that hit the headlines, but that's
Hmm.
not the only route. And depending what you're doing, maybe grants or
Sure,
you just have to as well as know your business, you need to know what the options are within there.
correct. And and this is not to point the finger to the media, but people act on what they see in the media. So the media tends to report company X raised X amount of millions, but raising the money in and of itself isn't a success. It's about what you do with the money.
Yeah.
In order to raise the money, you've sold a piece of your business, and the investors think that they can sell that piece of your business for more capital sometime in the future. And you hope the same because ultimately that will increase your net worth as well. But um, there are no guarantees in this world.
Yeah.
The only thing that's guaranteed is that you need to work your ass off. And yeah, I always think that if you then go into a partnership with people, you should make damn sure that you're on the same that you're focusing on the same trajectory and that you have the same goal in mind. And yeah, for most founders, that doesn't necessarily mean build something very fast within 7 to 10 years and exit it. Um, and who cares what happens to your employees?
Yeah.
Uh, because
And
that's the thing you need to consider.
and I think because that's what we see in the media, sometimes you think that's what everyone's doing, or that's the majority, and actually it's very very much the minority.
It
There's
is.
a lot happening that is not going to be reported in the media because it's boring, and actually boring business usually does really well.
Yes. There's this investor turned creator I'm following called Cody Sanchez out of the US. I don't know if you follow her, but she's made a brand out of investing into boring businesses and teaching people how to invest in boring businesses. And we also think it's very interesting because ultimately there are a few things that most people still haven't figured out, even though they could. So becoming like plumbing companies,
Mm.
HVAC companies, car washes, uh,
Care
you
homes,
name it, like
yeah, domiciliary care, yeah.
all these things. Boring, simple, yet very predictable in terms of cash flow. And
Mm.
if we circle back to private equity is looking for a return on capital.
Yeah,
That's it. So eventually these will also come into their within their scope. And yeah, there's your exit
yeah, yeah.
already.
Rounding the kind of the conversation off, if you had to give a piece of advice for a founder who's never had a conversation or is going to have that first conversation with someone who could be an investor, and we can leave that broad from
Sure.
like even your friends, family, or a more institutional. What do you think the what are you looking to accomplish within that first meeting?
If you don't understand what the person um, in front of you is trying to accomplish, it's very hard to build a relationship. So I think establishing common ground um, beyond, hey, we come from the same city or we support the same team, but from a business perspective, um, it's very unlikely that you'll succeed in closing them. And the objective in the beginning should therefore not be trying to close the person in the room, but trying to figure out if this is the right person to close. And if it isn't, enjoy the conversation, be on your way, and move on.
Mm.
Um, because, yeah, see it as having shots on target. You can only shoot so many times, and you want to make sure that when you shoot, it's a real opportunity. So that would be my most important advice. Try to understand who you have in front of you, what success looks like for them, and whether that aligns with what you're doing. And if it doesn't, move on.
I like the analogy to football there and the scoring on on goal.
Yeah,
And
it is. I mean, you can shoot from your own corner and try to score, let's say, 100 from 120 meters. It's very unlikely that you'll score.
yeah,
So you want to wait until you're in and around the box, and then go for it with 100% commitment.
yeah. Jason, you wanted to play in the Champions League. Building
Yeah, I
joined,
did.
does that scratch the same itch? Is it completely
No,
different?
no, it doesn't. We have a football here, and every now and then, I'll just do some kick ups or we'll play around with it, and it's nice. But if I still play Sunday League, and I play with guys who've been incredibly successful, or played for the likes of Premier League teams, even the Dutch national team, and I wouldn't say I would trade my life with them because I'm very, very grateful for where I am and who I have surrounding me. But if you would ask me, would I have rather been a football player and have had that? Yeah, probably yes. But as they say, the grass is always greener on the other side.
Jason, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to find out
Thank you,
more
Nicola.
and connect with you or know more about Joined Capital, how should they find you?
Um, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. We're on yeah, pretty much all platforms. So Jason Esseboom on LinkedIn, Joined Capital on both Instagram, LinkedIn, and even TikTok. So yeah, they can reach out there. And if there's anything I can do to help, yeah, feel free to let me know.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna
Nicola, thank
now
you so
find
much.
what you've been posting on TikTok. Thank you, Jason.
Take care. Bye bye.